Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Train Simulator Classic, and continuing on with our Pennsylvania Railroad series of videos. I figured since we're already diving down the hole of Pennsylvania Railroad with the train sim, I may as well continue on. So my next few videos will I'll probably go ahead and cover all of the Penzi content that I know of that's available, that I own. So next up on the list would be the H10 Consolidations, the 280s from DSG DDR. These are another one of the older models, but still definitely a goodie, especially for Horseshoe Curve and some of the other routes. It's a really nice generic locomotive. It fits in real well with northeastern routes, and it's good for mixed traffic. If you like doing road switching, freight, passenger, you can pretty well get away with just about anything with it. These locomotives were extraordinarily popular with the Pennsylvania Railroad as a kind of generic do-all end-all locomotive. Light freight mostly. I believe most of the Pennsylvania Railroad's 280s were typically regulated to freight. That's not to say that one wouldn't find them on passenger trains, but that is pretty much what they were built for, was freight services. You can see them on branches, switching, road switching, just about anywhere across the Pennsylvania's network. These are not well, they're not huge per se, especially not when compared to the decapods, but it's a nice vulnerable size. Whether or not one survives, I honestly don't know. I believe the H10s are part of a class. The H8 and H9s are also of the same build, with some relatively minor differences. I believe cylinder diameter is probably the biggest difference between the three classes, but they still use the same boiler and such. So I believe this is categorized in that group. Yeah, I was right. So there is one single H10 surviving. Number is 7688. It sits at the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. No clue whether or not it's ever been an option for restoration. Would be neat considering the lack of Pennsylvania equipment, but different story, different time. Cool side note though, these are one of those locomotives that was leased to the Long Island Railroad. So if one were so inclined to do some repaints, one could get away with some Long Island content using these locomotives. So again, these are done by DSG DDR, guy that did the now quite famous S1. You will get two with this pack, a clean variant and a weathered variant. I'm not particularly fond on the weathered variant. I won't lie, I don't mean to be brutal, but the weathering, I don't know, it didn't play out very well. I don't think it, in my opinion, looks very much like a it looks like he took a Google image, blew it up, and then stuck it over it. It just, I don't know. Not too fond on it. Other than that, though, there's absolutely no difference between the two locomotives. Just the weathering. So I'm not gonna dive too much into the two separate locomotives. Boink. As I die here, because change in weather. Let's be sure our tracks are set before we go rolling out and end up in a wreck. Boom, boom. Switch is thrown. Westward freight. Whoop! I saw that. Bah. There we go. And up to here. Should be good to go. Cool. So this locomotive you can pretty effectively run without the F4 HUD if you so please to. Right off the bat though, the cab is extremely dark. Very reminiscent of the RSE K4s. It's very dark, but luckily, unlike the RSC K4s, we had cab lights. However, as with just about every other model in Train Simulator, cab lights they take a massive toll on your frames. So with the cab lights on, we're fluctuating around 50, 60, 70. Cab lights off, boom. We go up a good 10, 20 frames a second. So your cab lights will eat your frames. HUD lights, pretty much the same. Just about everything can be fiddled with, as is typical of our wonderful developer. No noise with the door, but the door can be open, or you can open up a little window there. Windows can be open. Windows do make noise. Not the forward windows, just these. Wind deflector doesn't make any noise. Rear window does make noise. Those windows, so can open the cab vent. It doesn't make any noise. What do we got here? Exterior light. We got a little light underneath the cab. These are mechanically stoked, so you ain't gotta sit there with a shovel and throw coal in. All your stoker system is down in here. Firebox doors. Feed water system. Ejector pumps. Compressor. Injector. That'll be your oil feeds that I don't guess we get to fiddle with. Overall, the cab doesn't look too bad. It's just really, really dark, which isn't such a problem without your cab lights on, especially at certain times of the day. But a handbrake, feed water, or water feed on the tender. I don't believe these have, no water scoop. Oops, I didn't do that. Pull up our little F5 HUD. I do believe, unfortunately, I put the time of the day so the shadows on the engineer side, so it's kind of hard to see, but I do believe, Sorry, Johnson bar does transfer on the outside. Does translate anyway. So that's neat. It's powered. So everything in the piston does work, which is really nice. Could this be? These should be class lights, yeah. So they'll light up a little red right there. Class lights are nice. Not an obnoxiously bright glare or anything. They look pretty decent. They're not the best per se. I don't know what this little notch is, but there's certainly some of the better marker light effects. And then should be our headlight. Oops. Not that way. That way. Or not. There it is. I actually really like the headlight. No obnoxious glare. It's not a bright freaking white LED that so many devs are notorious for now. It's a nice kind of yellow glow, which is what should be on a steam locomotive. None of that bright mess. Let's see, should be our bell. Nope, that's a blower. Where is it at? There it is, bell. Pretty nice bell sound. It does have a little ringing gong, but you can just barely see it. It's very dark. But it does operate. It is steam operated. There is no sound occlusion. So the whistle bar does move, and it's got a high-pitch banshee style whistle, which I do get a kick out of them. They're an eerie sounding whistle, especially in the dark, but I don't like it on this model. So the ending is very abrupt. There's no ending sound to it. It just cuts off. And it also plays a tune as it goes on, which is extremely noticeable. As most know, I like to be able to play my tunes on my own. So I don't hate the fact that it's got a high and a low tune, but I think the low tune should be incorporated to a spacebar enter setup. So you use the enter bar, use the enter button with your spacebar so that it can fluctuate the whistle yourself. The beginning and the sound file itself is not bad. I just don't like the fact that it plays a tune there halfway and then the ending is non-existent. It's a very abrupt and it sounds very odd for doing crossing whistles. But the actual sound itself is actually, it's really cool. It's if this were about 12 o'clock at midnight, that'd be a really eerie sound to hear. I do believe that sound comes from the Reading and Northern's 462 that they operate. I know it wore a banshee whistle. Yeah, it wears a banshee whistle every now and then. That sounds very much like the banshee that it wears every now and then. Standard smoke, which not my favorite, not the worst. Steam effects I think are better than the smoke. Pretty typical. Texturing is really nice, as is pretty typical. Overall the texturing is quite nice. Now like I said, these are older models. They've been around a little bit now. But they've aged pretty well. Could they stand to have an update? Yes, absolutely. But they've aged alright. They're not quite like, let's say, the K4s that have aged miserably. Or, no disrespect, but the G-Trax locomotives, those have aged very badly. But these have aged pretty decently, considering these are older, but I won't lie, they could stand to have an update. So like our paint here, there's a pretty obvious Photoshop-esque look with the little pixel tiles if you get up close. But overall, the locomotive does look really good. Nicely textured, very well detailed for its time. So let's take it down the road. Brake sounds are pretty decent. Brakes are one of those that the running position is quite small. Release running on self-lap. Go ahead and open up our fire pit here. Now, something that's interesting is all you got to do is open the firebox. You don't have to mess with the stoker at all to increase your fire, which is a little bit entertaining. And then for some wonky reason, there we go. It can prove to be a little bit odd trying to use the injectors. Oh, that's interesting. Let's take it down the road, shall we? I can't get past that. It's some creepy. There is no cylinder buildup at all. These are pretty instantaneous. You open the throttle, they start to take off. It says there's wheel slip. I don't see it. A little bit of a wonkiness, but yeah. Oh well. Let's see if you gotta. Yeah, you gotta hold the sander forward, which is a little bit weird. Our cylinder effects, they're not bad. It does alternate, but it doesn't change in intensity or anything. And again, the texturing's It does look really good in operation. Movements are quite nice. I am overfilling my boiler. Whoops. I don't have a very heavy load, so we don't need a huge fire. It does use his standard chuff sounds, which are alright. Wouldn't say they're my favorite, but they're alright. There's our weathered Marriott. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do away with the HUD light. Just stick with the cab light. I think the cab light gives me better frame rates. So like I said, it could stand to have I think more than anything, it could stand to have a texture update. The model itself is modeled pretty decently overall, and it doesn't sound too bad, but a decent texture and sound update I think would go a very long way in improving this model for today's standards. Like I said, it's a nice generic model overall. We don't really have a generic US steam locomotive that's good for just general purpose outside of really this locomotive here is, you will find 280s everywhere, anywhere and everywhere. Historically speaking, I don't know if these actually ran on the horseshoe curve, but Who's to say they didn't, outside of somebody that's smarter than I. But they do look quite nice on the horseshoe curve, even though the route itself is pretty dated. They look pretty decent. They fit in alright. They pull alright. Now, like I said, the physics are a little bit wonky, and I do believe, technically speaking, this is the same cab used on the I1s. I do know the dev said that they had trouble getting hold of photographs of the actual cabs of the surviving locomotives, so they're not dead certain on what they're supposed to be, but it's functional, so I'm happy. It does have in-cab signaling, which I imagine is functional. Like I said, it absolutely walks away with the train though. Like, it's not even there, which is kind of entertaining, but ooh, what else is fun to know about these? These remained in operation until the end of the Pennsylvania Railroad steam. So these were worked pretty hard by the Pennsy. Standard light freight locomotive. Yeah, it's not, like I said, it's not a whole ton necessarily unique. They have much the same story as most other railroads, as 280s. Just across the board, a very well-rounded locomotive for light services, freight, yard switching, road switching. Very popular in scenic passenger services today. 280s are one of the most numerous wheel arrangements across the world to have survived. Just a very well-rounded wheel arrangement. There's not a whole ton to say about these that would be special. Like I said, they pick up and run pretty quick. We'll cut our reverser down to about 40. And then, sitting at 30% throttle with a 40% J-bar, and it had that jumping speed just then. It jumped up from 30 something to 38. About to hit 38. It's kind of wonky, but like I said, it is older. That's an interesting power line. A little bit wonky, but nothing wild. There's that kickover sound right about 40. We start to hear it fading in. That standard at-speed steam locomotive sound that is ever notorious on just about all American steam locomotives for Train Simulator. I wanted to see it again. It looked like it hopped back here. Oh well, it's probably something that didn't age well. This route has been around since the early days of railworks. This is it's old. It hasn't aged well at all. This is such a creepy whistle. But very nice locomotive. It's definitely not up to his current physics skills. The locomotive overall, it definitely shows its age. It's, like I said, one of his earlier models, and just overall, it could definitely benefit from an update. But again, it has aged really quite well for the most part. But yeah, I don't know what else there is to say. There's not a whole lot left. Great locomotive, just not too much to talk about, but it is a fun one, especially if you like running steam across the board anyway. You'll probably enjoy this, but if you're a big Pennsylvania Railroad fan, you'll absolutely enjoy this locomotive. It's a must-have. That's interesting. Shadows disappear in weird spots. We're definitely boogieing up this hill a little bit faster than the speed limit is. I believe the speed limit's actually 35, but it's fine. It's not too terrible. This is one I definitely come back to a lot. Especially on the horseshoe curve, this is a locomotive I come back to an awful lot because it does fit this route really well next to the I-1s. We'll go ahead and start cutting our throttle, pull up our brakes. It stops. You can lock the wheels though, which is really cool. It shows a little stream of sparks, so that's pretty neat. If you use the locomotive brake, it's got a nice shower of sparks. The brakes do grab pretty quick and pretty violently. Physics-wise, that's probably my biggest complaint. The brakes do grab on, and it's got a very noticeably quick grab, but let's say it is what it is. Whoops. Yeah, we let our boiler water get a little bit high there, but it is what it is. It's not gonna hurt. Not for this video anyway. But yeah, there it is, guys. The Pennsylvania Railroad H10 Consolidation. Truth be told, if you really wanted to, you could get away with the H8s and the H9s. I do believe there's a relatively small difference in cylinder size across the three, but otherwise they're more or less the same locomotive. So if one of you out there is feeling real froggy, you could definitely modify this into the later models, but overall the locomotive does look good. I do highly recommend going and checking it out. As always, link in the description. Yeah, hope to see you guys next time on another, as we continue our Pennsylvania Railroad looks